Hello and welcome to FlipAgain development with React. My name is Keith Elliott. We are creating a flashcard app. In this episode number 5, we will continue working through our ToDo app, a simple app to help us understand the basics of React. And in particular, we will dig into controlled components. It's a concept basic in React for handling input data, input forms. Let's dig in. We will start by heading over to our terminal and firing up Redwood. So actually VS Code first. So code dot, I'm in the ToDo directory and VS Code is firing up. And let me fire up Redwood also from my terminal. So yarn Redwood dev kicks it off. It will open up our ToDo app here in Chrome, and as it's doing so, let's go look at the React docs. Here we are in the React docs, over in the main concepts. We've been thinking in React, and in particular in this session we will pop into the 9th article on forms. Forms are input, tools or a way to gather input from users. And the classic, say, example or HTML style is to use a form HTML element with an input elements and submit button. Forms look similar in React, but the recommended way to handle form input is via controlled components. They work through an example here. This is in the style of class components. We have been using function components, but the concept is the same. Essentially, you create an input item, HTML item, and you give it a value. The value is set to a dynamic item specified within the curly braces in JSX. And that dynamic item is a state variable. That state variable is defined up in the state, and upon change, the change is handled via an event handler. Here is the event handler that they created. The event handler can accept an event object, and within the event object, there's an object called target and a value or a property called value. The value contains the contents of the input. And so what we end up doing is typing in our input text box, and the value is, upon each click or keystroke, the value is updating the state. And let's do it. So right now we have in our basic app here, we have essentially our static version. As we were working through the development of this app and the concept of thinking in React, their guidance was to create a static version without state, and after that we kind of wore out the props, added as much functionality via props, and then we've been adding state and working through handling state updates. We haven't yet made it to our input text box. This is where we will work today. You can see that it works in terms of you can take this input, and I see it. It's returned to me. This is some amount of basic, say, I don't know what we call it, event handling that's built in to the browser. And when we kind of yank that out and put the React controlled component functionality in, it will ultimately look the same, but it will be handled behind the scenes a little differently. So let's dig in. Let's go to our input component, And just right out of the gates, let's go ahead and add our, let's change it to make it look like this. So we will give it a value and an onChange handler. All right. Input type equals text. That stays the same. Value equals something within curly braces. That something will be a state variable. And so it leads us to a decision, something to think about. Where should that state live? What state variable should that be? So let's think. We know that we store our to-do state within the to-do app component. Way up here. In our to-do app, we have default to-dos in our use state hook, where we define the to-dos in their state or as state variables, and we have the handlers that modify the to-dos. So this is where the to-dos live. In this case, our input text is not quite a to-do, it's just input text. So I think what we probably should do is define a new state variable right here within the component that will serve the purpose of simply say accepting the input state that's being typed, or input text that's being typed into the input text box. And so let's do it. So our state variable could be called new to-do text. How's that? And at first, we can give it a default. How about it's either, say, empty, an empty string, or how about a new to-do. New to-do. All right, so we'll give it a default, and then here in the input text element, we will set the value equal to new to-do text. All right, so this should do it. Let's go, we'll save it. We'll go back to the app, and I think we will see a new to-do. And I forgot to import. Let's do that. So if we are here and hit Control Space, use state, it automatically imports it for us. I've kind of figured that out on my own. I don't know if I could repeat it other than showing it to you, but anyway, it looks good. So now, yes, we have a new to-do. But look at this. I'm typing. You can hear me banging away on my keyboard, but the input is not being accepted. So we need to fix that. So let's fix it. So to do that, we give it an onChange event handler, which will be the set new to-do text. And we will give it the event dot target dot value, and just for kicks, I'll save this and show you an error, big ugly error, because we don't just call this function, we send it a function. The function is called whenever React calls it. Now it works. What fun. Okay, so now it accepts our input. Yeah, groovy. Okay, cool. So let's see, what's next? Well, we need a button, I suppose. Let's add a save button. Button. And it will have an event handler also on click equals something here. And we'll call it save. It doesn't like a blank function. All right, so we have a save button. The button needs to be implemented. Okay, so what happens when we click it? Well, what we have is the opportunity to take a next step. The next step being taking our new text item, the new to-do text, and adding it into our to-do list. And so to do that, we will follow the pattern that we had previously set of passing an event handler. Because essentially, the state that now needs to be updated is not, call it the temporary state of the to-do, the new to-do input item, but it's rather the state that lives up in the main app component, the to-dos, that needs to be adjusted. And so along the lines of creating handlers in the app component and then passing them via props to our component of interest, well, let's do that. So right here, let's create a new handler, function handle, click save new to do, and it will accept new to do text. And what we will need to do is implement it. But as we did in the past, let's go ahead and just wire it up and confirm that when we click, we execute the function. That works. And also let's go ahead and pass, here is new to do text. We will look at our new to do text just to confirm it contains what we need. Okay, so we have this function. We need to pass it as a prop to our to-do input component. We can name it whatever we want. Handle click save new to-do. I think that's fine. It's a little long and verbose, but that's the way I roll. Okay, so we've passed it here. So let's go to the to-do input component and accept it. We will destructure it, grab it right here. And this is the handler that we need to run right here. And it takes our new to-do text. And the new to-do text is always up to date because we are handling a state update upon each change. Okay, so if we save it, go to our app, hit the save button, we can go to the console and see that the handler gets is executed. So let's do that. So save it, come back here, open the console, Control-Shift-I. Let's save it, and we see, here we go. Here is new to-do text, a new to-do. All right, awesome. Okay, so now we've got it, but it's not doing anything. We need to make more to-dos show up. So we will head back to the handler and implement it. Handle click save new to do. All right, so we need, if we look at our other handlers, we have this habit of simply calling set to-dos, which is our useState, the function returned by useState, which updates the state, the to-do state, and we send it a new list of to-dos. Okay, so let's follow that pattern. Set to-dos, and we will give it, in this case, here's how I plan to do it. We will give it the existing to-dos, and we will add to that, or concat to that, a new to-do with an ID of, at the moment, we'll just hard code an ID. And text, let's look at what they look like. ID text is complete, all right? ID text is equal to new to-do text, and is complete, we will set to false. Okay. I think this will work. So what we're doing here, if you're not familiar with this syntax, is we are using the array spread notation, which can be used in conjunction with, well, new array elements to concat an old to a new, old array items to a new item, and it returns a new array. It doesn't mutate, it returns a new one. So that's a snazzy trick in JavaScript, and it's common to see this within React. So I'm saving it. Head back here. When I click it, let's see, it should update the state. Let's see what happens. Yeah, there we go. We saved it, and we see a new to-do item. We need to tighten it up though, because check this out. So we're able to add the same one over and over. If we remove it, it removes all of them, which is not our ideal, or it's not our desired behavior. Even if I rename it with a different name, it still removes all of them. And that is because our ID is the same, and I delete based upon ID. So we need to update this ID. To help keep the pace moving, I went ahead and added a function called, what is it called? I think it's called get, let's go look at it. Get next ID. I will show you what I did, get next ID. So the get next ID function returns the next ID for use for a new to-do. You send it the to-dos array, and it returns the next ID to use. And you can see how I did it. I do some basic checking if to-dos is undefined or is not an array. I throw errors. Otherwise, I reduce, use R, Ramda, to grab the maximum ID that exists, and then I pull out that value, and then I add one to it. So it's fun Ramda logic. There are multiple ways to do this, but as I've mentioned, I'm a Ramda fan, and that's how I did it. It's kind of neat. I visited whatever it is, ramdajs.com, and spent some time on my couch studying up on reduce. Really is really quite slick. The built-in REPL they have is a great environment to practice. So I figured it out, and I implemented it, and I tested it as well. You can see my test. And just for kicks, let's open a terminal, control tick, yarn redwood test. This will kick off all the tests, and then I will filter it down to the util tests. Maybe I'll even break it. We'll watch it break, and then I'll fix it. We'll watch it pass. So as it's doing that, let's go ahead and just break it. So the first one, we get our next ID, and we expect it to be 5. If it's actually 5 plus 1, it will break. So I'll save it. It's actually running automatically. And get next ID, failed. You can see that we expected 6, but we received 5. And if I go back to the correct expected value, save it, it's rerunning. And we see that it's passing. So we're rocking along. It works. Control tick will hide that window. And so let's go back to our ToDo app and use our new function, get next ID, and we hand it ToDos. A real annoyance to me is in some cases I capitalized the D in ToDos, in some cases I didn't. At the moment I'm resisting the urge to go fix it, just because we're trying to get this ToDos app done. But naming is important, and generally I recommend fixing little naming annoyances that bug you. Okay, saved it. Let's see if it auto-imported. It did. All right, so it has it. So now, if we go back to our app, close down these guys for now, save it. Here's our new ToDo. Here's another one and another one. And now if I remove them, it removes them appropriately. And I can save it and move it around, and that just works. I can toggle it to be done, and that works still too. Okay, cool. All right, so we've added a new ToDo, but let's do some basic fine-tuning here. A couple things that if we save an empty string, the functionality works, but it's really not ideal. So we can quite easily fix that. So let's implement the ability to not save an empty array. So let's go to the input. One way to do it is to where's my input? I've got too much open here. Hide this, hide this, hide that. Here we go. Okay, so one thing we'll do is simply add a disabled attribute here. So disabled equals, it's a Boolean, a truthy or a falsy. It's disabled if this element, or what we pass in, is truthy. And so if our new ToDo text, any variable can be used for, say, a truthy test. And let's see, if it's an empty string, it will be falsy. But we want not falsy. So if it's an empty string, it will be falsy. Not falsy is truthy, and it will be disabled when it's truthy. All right, got it? So let's save that. Let's go look here. We have new ToDo text, but if we delete it, we don't. Now our save button is grayed out. And just for kicks, also in the handler, we can beef up the handler a bit. Let's go ahead and zap. We can zap the console statement. But as well, in this right here at the top, I would propose that if new to-do text, oops, not that, new is undefined, or if the new to-do text is an empty string, then just return and don't do anything. This it's a bit redundant because we shouldn't get to this state if our button's disabled, but just to help make this function a little more robust, we can do that here. And I spent some time digging into what happens if you send a blank hit save when the input is blank. And it sometimes is undefined and sometimes was an empty string in my observations. All right, so we clean that up. Let's go look, just confirm that we're rocking. And it would be cool to, upon clicking enter, save it, which we could do, but not now. Again, we're trying to work through and actually get this to-do app done. And it's looking good in terms of core functionality. I think we are done with the save new functionality. All right. All right. Let's see. One thing that is annoying me is, if you recall, a couple episodes ago or so, we created a file with default to-dos. And so we can zap all of the hard-coded to-dos here and instead use our default to-dos. Voila. And it auto-imported. Slick. So I'll go ahead and remove all these guys, Control-Shift-K. Deletes rows or lines. Okay, so our initial to-dos equal the default to-dos, which were defined in this util file, which is reused in the test also. So it cleans up our to-do app a bit. Okay. Let's think. There is an edit button. We haven't implemented that. I would propose, in the name of getting it done, we minimize the scope of this and just get rid of the edit button. Good enough. Let's go to the, where is that? That's in the row, to table row. Let's go find it. We'll go to our Explorer, open up to-do table row. We will find our way down to button edit, Control-Shift-K, save. There's another button here. I guess if we're really gonna remove it, I feel a little sad removing something I created, but not too sad. Button remove. I don't think, anyway, let's remove all of it here. Delete. Yes, we can remove it all. Wait, sorry, not that. Button edit, glad I didn't do that. Button edit. Delete this guy. All right, that's gone. Okay, it's also sort of satisfying to remove stuff that it's not needed. Uh-oh, what did I do? it looks like I'm still referring to button edit somewhere in the mix. Yeah, here we go. Control Shift K, get rid of it there. All right, good. That cleans it up a hair. And given that they're such short items, if we want to edit one, we'll just remove it and add a new one in its place. Good enough. Okay. I think we are in good shape. So let's do a little bit more cleanup. Well, actually, potentially a lot of cleanup in terms of design. This look and feel is quite rudimentary. There is no styling whatsoever, and it's, I would say, pretty ugly in terms of the look of our little mini app. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on styling, which is a lot of fun and also, for me at least, time consuming, but it's like painting. It just takes time. It's a very creative thing. But what I'd like to do is at least move, center everything. So let's center everything, and the buttons are all squished together. Let's give the buttons some space. And finally, I don't like the commas in the mix. We'll get rid of those. All right, so sounds good. Let's do it. We're calling our core functionality done, and let's make a run through some styling. In Redwood, they provide a CSS file in the root of the web side, or the web source folder. And what I found is you can add CSS code here and add class names and such to your React components, and it just works. And another quick note as well, just because I'm addicted to the docs here, under the FAQs there are some notes on styling. Essentially, styling works like it does with plain HTML and CSS, in that you define class names. The class name is written in camel case with a capital N, and you can give any HTML element class names, and if the class names are associated with CSS, they will be styled appropriately. And another note is that in some cases the class name is dynamically defined. In this example, we can do that, for example, to make our completed to-dos a different color. So we should do that also. In fact, that's probably a good place to start. So let's make our completed to-dos a different color. So here let's add a class called to-do complete, and adding dashes in CSS is common, not, in contrast, camel case. And I like to prefix my class names with something specific to my app, so to minimize the chance of a clash naming conflict. And we will simply give this completed to-dos a color. We'll just make it red. All right, and so now let's go to our code. Where is it? It's in the table row, I believe, where we show the text. It's right here. And in the div statement here, let's add a class name equal to. So here's where we dynamically define it. It will be dependent upon the ToDo .isComplete variable. And if it is complete, we will add the class name. In this case, we will use the logical and operator to set a class name if isComplete is true. And if so, we will define the class name as we defined it in the CSS file. The logical and operator returns the second item if the first item is truthy, which is a fun trick that you see in React development. If there's not yet a third option, if it's just, if this one thing, then return that, then you see this style often. If this, then that, then you see the ternary operator. In this case, I think this is fine. I don't have a style for the not completed items. And so if it is complete, it will be, the class name will be defined ToDo complete. Note that if JSX returns falsy, then it's ignored. It's not like the class name will be set to false. That took me some time to figure out. But that's the scoop. So now, if we go look at the ToDo, once it's marked complete, it should be red. We'll see if we got it working. Let's see, toggle done, yay! Look at that, it worked. What fun. Toggle done, toggle done. Awesome. Okay. Okay, so next, let's center the whole thing. To center it, let's use Flexbox. The folks at CSS Tricks have a great Flexbox guide that I study up on each time I need to use it. And I did already to help be a bit more efficient in this session. What we will do is define a Flex container. And that can be essentially our app as a Flex container, and we'll need a few Flex items. So our Flex container will be our app as a whole. And then our Flex items can be the title, the input, and then this table. So let's do that. In the Flex container, so we need to define a class that will be used to define our container. So in our CSS ToDo container, we'll set the display type or value to Flex. And the ToDo container is the parent app, which actually, if we go to the ToDo app, it's actually not the ToDo app, it's what the ToDo app lives in. I did start putting it here when I was kind of working through this in advance. I did put it here, but it didn't work because the title lives elsewhere. And we could probably refactor it. In fact, we probably should refactor it just to keep it clean in here. But the other, right now, the page, the home page, includes our to-dos. But actually, let's go ahead and remove the to-dos out of here. And we will, or remove the title to-dos, and we'll put that title right here. Let's just go look and make sure that it still looks the same, it still works. All right, so now now this div is in fact the container that we want to define as our flex container. So our class name equals ToDo container. And then each of these main chunks, the title, the ToDo input component, and the ToDo input table, will need to be defined as ToDo or a flex items. And we will do that by giving them a class name that we will call ToDo item, I guess is fine. I will prefix it as flex item to minimize confusion with plain Jane or ToDo items. So ToDo flex item. Do we do that? I guess we do. Actually, I don't think we need this. It's just the child elements are the direct, I believe the scoop is the direct child elements in the container are handled in the Flexbox fashion. All right. So nothing has changed yet on our app. Oh, yes, it has changed. So we've gone from our columnar view to a row view. Let's switch back to column. To change to the column, we set the flex direction equal to column. And we should be back to what we were looking at. Yep. Okay. So now we need to center. If we scroll down and look at the example, an example, in the CSS tricks notes, the first thing this shows, how do you center it? Or what's a way to center it? And the neat magic way is within a child, a flex child, set the margin to auto. Okay, so now we will in fact need to add a CSS class name to our children within the flex container, and we will set the margin appropriately. So we will have, yeah, I like child. Child's even better than ToDo item, flex item. And we'll set margin. We're going to play around with this, but for now we'll set it to auto. And then let's go back to our app here. And the main child elements will have a class name equal to ToDo child. This will have ToDo child. I won't pass a class name in as a prop. I'm just going to set it in the top level item. So let's see, the top level item for ToDo is, the next one is ToDo input, which returns a div with stuff in it. And I will add class name to the div of ToDo child, and then the next one is the ToDo table. So let's go to the ToDo table. And I don't have it open. Let's open it. ToDo table. And in the ToDo table, I give it an unordered list. I guess that works. I've never used, let me just, feel kind of like I'm cheating, but I will wrap this in yet another div, which feels like poor style. I need to add a div if we don't need it, but I don't know That's just what I'm going to do at the moment. Okay, so we have our children. We've got a to-do title, an input box component, and then this table as the three main children. And they are labeled as such. If we go to our index, to-do child. All right, so now when we save it, we should go back and we will see that the spacing has changed. Ta-da! It has changed. It has changed. I think it still needs some work. Let's see. But it's not too horrible. Let's, again, I will resist the urge to keep iterating in public here, but I may very well do so after we wrap the video. So let's move on to the other thing I mentioned. Let's add some space around the buttons and get rid of these commas. So to do that, first of all, for the buttons, we will add a CSS row. I don't even know what this is called. CSS chunk for a button. This is just for the element type of button. And we will give it a margin of, let's say, 5 pixels. And that's added space. Okay. Let's get rid of the commas. The commas are in the to-do table row. Here's one. Here's another. Here's another. And yet another. Okay, no more commas. Oh, there's one trailing comma here. All right. Toggle done. By the way, I set a setting in Chrome to flash the components when user input occurs. That's why the green boxes show up, but it only shows up when the DevTools are open. If not, it doesn't show up. Okay. All right. Oops, I think I just found a bug. If we set this to done, move it up here. Oh no, I guess it was, I probably hit the wrong button. So set it to done. Oh, this is a bug. I can't move it down. Did I not implement the move down functionality? I guess I didn't. Okay, so I need to implement the move down functionality, and I will do that not live here, but before the next session. But we are approaching 50 minutes, which seems to be my kind of sweet spot. And so let's rewind down for now, and really I am going to call this early version done. I will go ahead and save it, commit it out on GitHub, and in the next episode I can point us to that location and just keep a snapshot of it for posterity to learn the basics of thinking in React. So what we did is we've walked through this theme of thinking in React. It took about 5 hours of recorded time, and personally a lot more than that, just for me studying up on the concepts. But personally, I'm feeling quite good about call it basic React concepts. State management in particular, I found to be not horribly intuitive at first, but now it's starting to feel quite natural. And so we started with a mock. We drew on our virtual whiteboard the ToDo app. We wrote out the component hierarchy. We named them. We created a static version. And then we implemented as much functionality as we could with props and identified the minimal amount of state needed and decided that the state should live in the root component. And via inverse data flow, essentially adding handlers as props, add the handlers in the location where the state lives, is where we define the handlers, and we send those handlers down to the event, the input items that require or handle the events, the user events. Those are associated with the handlers that allow us to send little bits of data up the upstream. And that is it. And so our app's looking pretty good. In this final session, we added our input text functionality. And in that, it was kind of a little mini thinking in React session, in that we had to decide where the state should live. And we put it within the component. But that's often a key question. Where does the state live? The other thing that we thought about is, or worked through rather, was the components or form handling via controlled components. Controlled components. I have developed apps way back many years ago via the old school style with prior technologies, and this controlled components concept was really different to me. And so it took a few at-bats to help me gain confidence and comfort with it. But I'm there, and it works. So again, our theme is upon change, we handle the change via a handler that takes the event.target.value and adds it to a state variable. That state variable is set as the value of the input item of interest. And we did it. And boy, it just seems to work. Okay, well, I've enjoyed it. These first 5 sessions of creating a simple ToDo app. Here's what's on my mind now. I've got a few things on my mind. Number 1, in particular, is persistent state. How do we save state beyond our session? That's probably where I need to head next, because that's the most, say, challenging thing. I don't know how at the moment. I need to figure that out. As well, I really am itching to just do everything with TypeScript, which sounds like fun to me. And there's also a fun tool called Storybook, which again sounds like fun. These guys are going to be candy for me. And this guy will be the equivalent of eating my veggies. So I will eat my veggies first to work out the persistent state, and then we will essentially redo it all with TypeScript and Storybook to have some fun. So that's the scoop. So next item up for me is to create an app, redo it with persistent state. And that's what I'll be thinking about over the next week until the next deployment or the next session. And just to give you a hint, I will adopt the way that we do it in React or Redwood. And the Redwood, if we go to Redwood.js and find our way to the tutorial, the concept of cells and getting dynamic, it's all wrapped around where the data, persistent data, and storing it in a database. And then really what's kind of pressing on my mind is how do I take the basic React concepts that we've worked through and blend them with the style that the Redwood folks have adopted. So anyway, we'll see. I'm excited about digging in, and we'll keep at it. So thanks for joining me. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.